Grab a cup of tea or listen as you go, ladies. This is your hour with Dr. Zoe, your life and relationship coach, with encouragement, on-point insight, inspiring guests, health tips, and advice. Dr. Zoe helps busy women keep their mind in the game by redefining your superwoman. You're listening to The Dr. Zoe Show.
Thank you for tuning in. I'm Dr. Zoe, and you are a pretty amazing woman who is strong and capable of handling all the curveballs that life throws at you. Rest when you must, but don't quit. There is strength for the journey, ladies. My show is not for fabled beings with capes who have it all together. This show is for real women who sometimes struggle in the superwoman game. We all struggle sometimes, and so what that means is that this show is for all women. If you're tuning in for the first time, welcome. This is a live radio show if you happen to be tuning in on podcast. And so the cool thing about it is that it's the real deal. We're here live. There's no stop and re-record if we mess up, if there's some ambient sounds. So it's a little different than a regular podcast, but it's fun, and thank you for tuning in. We talk here about things that matter to busy women all over the world. Every woman has a superpower, and my goal as your life coach is to help you find it, embrace it, and share it with the world. I encourage you in your struggles, and I share some of my own. I'm not struggle-free for sure. As long as we are alive, there will be struggles. And the struggles don't go away, but as long as we're focusing on growing, we get stronger. And I'm here to give you tips and advice to make your life a little easier. We are redefining your superwoman. For those who can't always listen live, you can watch the back episodes and subscribe to my podcast on iTunes and pretty much any podcast places out there. Just search for the Dr. Zoe Show, Redefining Your Superwoman. If you know of a friend who may benefit from some of my topics, please spread the love and share my show. And if you like my show, show me some love with some stars. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel, Dr. Zoe Talks, and listen to back episodes there. You can text the word JOIN to 38470 to become part of my tribe and get my free monthly newsletters where you will get freebies and monthly tips, encouragement, and insight right into your inbox. So I'm excited to have my guest, Shonnie Lavender. She is a coach for parents who are tired of struggling in the parenting game. Did you know there are mom coaches out there? I didn't know that. So we're going to give you moms some tips to reduce your parenting struggles, and man, do we all need that. No excuses, right? Next tip is choose something over nothing. 30-minute workouts are king in my world. Something is always better than nothing, and if it weren't for 30-minute workouts, I wouldn't be in shape. 7-minute workouts can even be beneficial. I do those sometimes. So it doesn't matter if you don't have a lot of time. You can usually fit 20, 30, 10, something. You just have to do something, and something consistently over time adds up. Next tip, and this is a big one, choose sprinting over running or jogging, especially for busy women. You guys can go run a mile, or for me, I trained a whole year for the New York Marathon. I swear I didn't lose a pound. I don't think I looked any better. I was like, what's up? I'm running 26 miles and I don't look any better. But what actually happens is when you jog consistently or run consistently, your body adjusts. So it actually over time uses less energy to do your runs. Sprinting is very, very different. When you sprint, you use slightly different muscles, your fast twitch muscles, and also it just really attacks the metabolism. It's harder for your body to adjust because you're moving quickly. And whether you're, a big sprinter or not, it doesn't matter. If you're just moving your body quickly, you do 10 sprints, like 50, 100 meters, maybe that takes you 20 minutes. That's so much better than going out for a 20 or 30-minute jog. So sprint. You shouldn't wait to feel motivated to work out because, newsflash, it's not ever going to happen. You're not going to feel motivated, and you can't wait for that to happen. You just have to do it. Even though you don't feel like it, you just got to do it. And remember, all you need is 30 minutes, and you're going to feel awesome afterwards. So if you don't have time for a huge workout or you don't have a treadmill, focus on the major muscle groups: squats, push-ups, lunges, planks. Boom. You get those in, you're going to see some results. Okay, I hope those were some helpful tips. And next up is our guest, Shonnie Lavender. She is a coach for parents tired of struggling, and I'm really excited to have her here via Skype from Colorado. She's going to help us with some of our parenting struggles. We all have this picture-perfect idea of what amazing parents we're going to be before we actually have children. My 15-year-old son tells me all the time what a perfect parent he's going to be. And I pray that he will be pretty close, because we know that the perfect parent doesn't exist. But good enough is more than good enough. And I remember what a great parent I was before I became one, and how much I judged other parents. And honestly, I'm quite ashamed at my ignorance now that I've been in this parenting game for 16 years. And also, I think back to when I was a young therapist, and I treated kids and their parents. And I kind of cringe when I think, there was this specific mom who was pretty young herself that I saw for a while, and she had a special needs kid, and she was clearly overwhelmed and frazzled. She often missed therapy appointments, and when she did show up, she was almost always late. And I remember I judged her for her inability to keep it together, and that was so unfair of me, because of course, remember, I was a perfect parent. Especially now, I'm not frazzled all the time, but I've been that frazzled mom with the special needs kids. And I think about her often and how she could have really benefited from a therapist who was loving and gave her grace and told her it would get better and that things would be okay, instead of telling her that she needed to be more committed to the process and telling her all the things that she was doing wrong as a parent. The reality is that parenting is hard. There are a million curveballs that are thrown at us in the process that we could have never anticipated. So, welcome, Shonnie. Fix us. Help us.
There's no fixing. What a great intro, Zoe, because you're so right. It is, before we're parents, it's easy to say, we'll do this and do that, and I know what to do. And then once we are in that place, it's different. And we really say, wait a minute, I didn't realize this piece. And it doesn't mean that's an excuse for us to say, it's hard, so we can't do it. But yeah, there's definitely things we can do to make it easier for ourselves and easier on our children as well.
Absolutely. So, Shonnie, tell us your story. Tell us how you got to a point where you are helping parents in their parenting journey.
Well, it's a little similar in terms of what you're talking about. Hey, I wasn't doing parenting and then I became a parent. Mm-hmm. So I was a coach prior to becoming a parent. When I had my daughter 7 years ago, though, what I noticed is, for me personally, that was the Life PhD program, right? It's like, if you want to grow yourself, if you want to stretch and learn, have a child. I mean, that's not the reason to have a child, but it's definitely going to stretch you and grow you. And so I said, if this is what it's like for me, aren't there other moms and dads out there as well who are wanting to really make the most of this experience for themselves, certainly, and yet really for their children, to not just be winging it? And even though there are a lot of resources out there, what I find is that some of those resources actually lead us, especially moms, to overwhelm. It's like, I read this. And so now it's like, now I have to do this, and I have to do this, and I have to do this. And so in a way, it can actually work against us to be seeking out so much information, because then it's just one more to-do list. And as busy women, we often do that to ourselves, right? We're like, that's just one more thing that I need to do, and I need to do well.
Absolutely. It does. It creates guilt, it creates shame. And then moms aren't talking about what they're really doing at home because they're feeling guilty, like, I'm not doing enough. I'm not buying everything organic. I let him, watch TV yesterday, or I did this. And yes, there's so much shame that can be created by a lot of that. I mean, the internet's awesome. It gives us lots of information, but sometimes it is information overwhelm.
Yeah, and I think for what I find with most of my clients is that, yes, there is information. We all benefit from learning and getting new ideas. And yet, often what's really the struggle in parenting is what's going on in our heads. So it's what you talked about at the top. It's those comparisons we make. We see somebody else doing it, quote unquote, right. And so then I'm a terrible mom. I can't do that. Or we see somebody doing it in a way that we judge as not the right way. And so then we think, oh yeah, I've got it all together. So we're constantly really adding to our stress rather than, you know what, it is definitely an up and down there. And that's, as you talked about with yourself, I don't hold myself out as a model of perfection. I share a lot of my stories of here's what I did do well. And even knowing what I know, yeah, we're human. And we still are going to drop the ball. And so to me, one of the opportunities there is to learn ourselves and also to set a wonderful model for our children so they grow up having more empathy for themselves and appreciating that, you know what, no matter what, they're not going to be perfect because there is no such thing.
There isn't. And I love that you said that. And I always say we should not be striving for perfection. We should be striving for good enough, because good enough parenting creates awesome, amazing children. So we will be right back in a few minutes with my guest, Shonnie Lavender. She is helping us with our parenting struggles. See you in just a minute. People ask me, how do you have so much energy? I am not a coffee drinker, but I love the benefits of matcha green tea. More antioxidants than coffee and a smooth energy, not the jittery kind that lasts me all day long. Perfect for you supermoms too. I have searched the world over for that perfect matcha for my smoothies, and I have found it at Kiss Me Organics. You can get it too at kissmeorganics.com. Enter the promo code Dr. Zoe, DRZOE, for 10% off and free shipping. Experience the smooth, healthy, organic energy of matcha green tea. KissMeOrganics.com. Hey guys, we are back. This is the Dr. Zoe Show, and we are here with my guest, Shonnie Lavender, who is a parenting coach, or I'm sorry, a parent coach for parents. I think I could have used one years ago. I've got it almost together now, but I didn't know there were parent coaches to help you along that journey. So, Shonnie, can you tell us what are the biggest issues that people come to you for coaching?
Absolutely. So there's definitely some variety, but I would say they fall into a couple of categories. Mm-hmm. One are when there is an issue, and those issues usually center around things that their children are doing that are not working for the parents. So, you know, that can run any gamut. But a lot of people, most of the people I work with have younger children. So they are in, you know, elementary school. So it's children who are in a stage of saying no. I just talked to a mom yesterday. It was like, you know, my 2-year-old, that's all she says. So, you know, really, how do I respond? What do I do? Because I'm noticing I'm frustrated, and yet I want to support her, you know, and I understand a little bit of why children say no. So things like that, where parents are saying, this is not working, and yet I don't want to do just what was done to me as a child, and so help. What do I do differently? And that goes up all the way through elementary school and beyond. But are those behaviors, so they're challenged with things like bedtime, those daily routines like brushing the teeth, getting out the door, you know, those things that just make life really sticky and frustrating for everybody. You know, that's sort of parents' breaking points a lot of times. The other one that I get a lot of times actually are couples and parenting well together and parenting from the same page.
I want to talk about that. I want to talk about parenting style differences. But first, when it comes to that toddler no, newsflash, it comes back. And it comes back with a vengeance during, you know, I call adolescence, it's just that toddler period all over again, but in a bigger body. Because it's, and really when you look at the goals developmentally, it's independence, right? So that's what that's what's going on with the toddler, and that's the exact same thing that's going on with your adolescent. And if you can see that in your adolescent, oh, this is what they were doing when they were 2. It's just a little different. The back talk, you know, is a little more, you know, defined and creative, but if you can see that, sometimes it can help you give them a little bit of grace and understand that that's what they're going through. It's their need for independence, because if they don't go through that, they're not going to be able to launch. So it is that process.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. It is that awareness for many parents, because still there's a lot of old thinking about children and human development. And so people do those labels of, you know, strong-willed, disobedient, defiant. And those don't help. That just creates more of a disconnection. So then we really end up being in an adversarial relationship with our kids. You know, we're like, oh, you're my enemy. That's not a conscious thought, but it's that unconscious idea that when we don't have the awareness of, like you said, this has a developmental purpose that's really important. And that doesn't mean, you know, some parents tend to go then just, they flip over and they're like, okay, my child's in charge. And the children don't need that.
Right.
For many parents, though, it's how do they find a place that's authentically true for them, that really respects their child and still says, you know, there are things that do need to get done in a day, and there are things that we do to live together cooperatively. And so it's really working with parents to make better decisions for them and not just going from, oh, well, this is what was done to me, so I guess that's what I have to do.
That's a very good point. And I think another one is the realization that you can't really parent every child the same because every child is different. And I was just talking about this with my son, and I said, I don't have the same expectations for all of you guys. I know you. Mm-hmm. I know you well, and I know what you're capable of. And so what I'm expecting from you is something that I know, you know, that you're capable of, and I don't expect that from, you know, one of my other ones. So it is understanding, too, that your kids have different temperaments. They do have, you know, different personalities, and you have to parent that child, which gets a little more complicated the more kids you have.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, too, that I'd add in is that I really, and you made that distinction of the difference between a parenting coach and a parent coach. I really work with the parents because the other thing I see is that so often we get focused on our children's behavior. And so we think, what's the technique? What's the tool? How do I change them? And as hard as this may be for some listeners to hear, you know, we don't have any power over our children. Never have. I mean, we really don't. Now, when they were little, we definitely had more ability to control them in terms of, okay, physically, you're going to get in this, you know, car seat now, and even that can be problematic, right? But you know, we had those places where we could say, no, this is what's going to happen, but still, overall, we don't actually have control over the choices they make. And so, helping parents to say, what can they do themselves to shift? Because that's where they have full power, is over what they as a mom or dad is doing versus what their child is doing.
You're right. You only have full control over yourself, and you have to utilize that. But we do have influence. We don't have control, but we do need to know that we do have influence, and we need to...
Yeah, and learning how to do that in a way that is really effective and doesn't have a lot of added on negatives about it. Mm-hmm. You know, I think that's one of the things that we slip into, is we do things that we think, oh, okay, well, that's going to change the behavior, but we don't think about, well, what else does it carry with it? You know, what are the other things? So it's
unintended consequences.
Exactly, yes. Exactly. So that's one of the things I like to help people with, is really being mindful of, okay, that's a choice. You can absolutely make it. No judgment. And do you see the other pieces that might bring with it? And is that what you want? Because it's like with a young child, you know, you want them. There are times when we all just want our child to say, yes, Mom. Mm-hmm. Whatever you say, Mom, right?
Yes.
We're like, yes. However, if we think about, well, what happens when they're 16 and they're with a peer and their peer says, you know, hey, I want you to do this. Do we want them to have had a real steady experience of just going along with what other people tell them? Or do we want them to have had practice voicing what's true for them and saying, you know, that doesn't feel right for me, or, you know, you can do that, but I don't want to do that. And so, you know, we have to remember, we don't have to, but if we remember that, then sometimes it can make those in-the-moment struggles easier to say, you know, wait a minute, this is going to serve a purpose later on, even though right now I really wish they would just do what I say.
Very good point. Very good point. So if you are just tuning in, I'm Dr. Zoe, and we are here with my guest, Shonnie Lavender. She is a coach for parents for all your parenting issues. So, Shonnie, can you tell us how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah,
and how can they be helped by you?
Lots of different ways. sort of depends on the person, but I have a Facebook community. So if they're on Facebook, they can find me. This is parents all over the world. It's called the Conscious Moms Circle. So they can look that up on Facebook and request to join. It's a place where they can post questions, get feedback from me and other parents who are on this conscious journey to parent in a loving, peaceful way, mindful way. They can always look me up on my website, ShonnieLavender.com. But I also have a YouTube channel. I'm a visual learner, so personally for me, I like that. So if they go to YouTube and look up Shonnie Lavender, which is ShonnieLavender, I have a number of videos on topics like this. So that gives them a taste of like, hey, is this the person for me? So those are a couple good places they can look for me.
Wonderful. And you also have some programs as well that people can take advantage of?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do one-on-one coaching, so I do private coaching, but I also do groups, and I also have self-study programs. So for people who want to dip their toe in the water and try something, I have some self-study courses that they can buy, and they get the materials via email, and they learn at their own pace. So I've got one, in fact, going back to the unintended consequences. Shaming is one of those topics that parents don't realize that there are times when they shame, when they're trying to guide their child and influence, and they do it in a way that adds on shame, which they absolutely don't want to do because all the negative consequences of that, but they don't realize they're doing it. But now they do, and so they want to change it. So I have a course called Stop Shame that is around the steps that can eliminate shaming impulses, and then what do you do instead to guide your child without resorting to shaming. So I have things like that they can look up to. And they can find that on my website also.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. So right after we come back, I want to talk about parenting style differences, because for people who come into my practice and are looking for help, couples often, one of the major issues they have is differences in parenting styles, and this causes so much conflict, and I'm sure you probably get that as well. So I wanted, if any of you guys are struggling out there, and here's the reality, we tend to marry somebody who has a totally different parenting style than we do. It's just how it works. We don't really know that because we don't see that person as a parent. We have, even if we try to cover all bases, we don't really know how we're going to be as a parent. And so that's one of those kind of what do you call it? Curveballs, or like, I can't think of what it is, but it's one of those things that you just don't know, wild cards. And so when you guys might agree to things like, oh yeah, our kids aren't going to watch TV, or oh yeah, we're going to do this, but then you have a child and you realize that both of you guys approach parenting them in such a very different way, and it can cause a lot of conflict. So we're going to talk about that when we come back in just a minute.
People ask me, how do you have so much energy? I am not a coffee drinker, but I love the benefits of matcha green tea. More antioxidants than coffee and a smooth energy, not the jittery kind that lasts me all day long. Perfect for you supermoms too. I have searched the world over for that perfect matcha for my smoothies, and I have found it at Kiss Me Organics. You can get it too at kissmeorganics.com. Enter the promo code Dr. Zoe, DRZOE, for 10% off and free shipping. Experience the smooth, healthy, organic energy of matcha green tea. kissmeorganics.com.
Hi there, this is Dr. Zoe, and I am here with my guest, Shonnie Lavender, a coach for parents, and we're talking about parenting issues. We're talking about struggles that we have as parents sometimes. So I wanted to talk about parenting style differences, but I just got a text in from a listener, and she said, I'm having a really hard time listening to this. So we've been talking, this is me talking, Dr. Zoe, not reading. We've been talking about parenting and different ways that we want to really just be conscious and aware as we parent our kids. And so she said, I'm having a really hard time listening to this. I was brought up where I didn't really have choices and was just told what to do. I did have my moments of rebellion, but for the most part, I listened. Now, I just want my kids to listen to me, and they don't. I understand they have choices as human beings, but how do I get them to listen? They're 5 and 6 years old. So, Shonnie, there you go.
All right. Well, first I want to say, A, thank you for texting that, because you're not the only one who's ever asked a question like that. And second is, just a lot of compassion, because that's one of the hardest things as parents when we are wanting to raise our children. If there was stuff in our childhood that we didn't like, let me clarify, if there's stuff in our childhood we didn't like, then part of us has a reaction and we want to do things differently. And so it's hard to give our children things that we didn't have ourselves. And so a lot of compassion simply for, yeah, she didn't get that. She didn't get those choices to say, her truth or to do what really fit for her. So I think that's one thing. I want to really extend that compassion. So when we're in that moment with our children, a couple of things that I would suggest is that listening, that old style model was children listened because you were the parent.
Right.
That was the expectation and the demand. And that's not the way young children in particular, 5 and 6, they don't really operate that way. They are receptive to the people that they're connected to. So if they really feel connected to you, which means in some ways they are, feeling comfortable with you, they have that immediate connection. It's not they're connected because you're their mom or dad. That's what we do as adults. We say we're based on roles that we play. Mm-hmm. Kids are based on that immediacy of, do I feel comfortable with you? Are we connected right now? And so if we want them to listen, actually the way to do that is to bring a connection there and build that with them, because they are going to be much more receptive and open to us when they're connected to us. Yeah, they'll do things if they're afraid of us, sure. But the problem with that is then that they either hide the things that we don't want them to do, so they're still doing those things, so we haven't really, accomplished anything, except now we don't know they're doing them.
Right.
Or they, at some point, will stop listening and will stop doing, as your person who texted said, yes, I did do some rebellion. So yeah, we really want them to listen over the long haul. That's a relationship-based thing. That's a respect that we earn with them, that we don't just have because we have a role in their life.
I hear you, but I'm just thinking of different parents and different people that I know, and I notice that kids sometimes tend to act out more with the parent they're most connected with. Meaning they feel more comfortable, and so they tend to act out. And then, there's different, when you talk about connections, there's so many different types of connections, because there can be close connections with parents who are very permissive. And then you're going to have kids who are acting out. And so I'm just wondering about discipline. What do you suggest parents do as discipline for their children?
So let's clarify, so we're all talking about the same thing. So when you say discipline, tell me what that means to you, so we're on the same page.
When I think of discipline, I think of providing structure and consequences for behavior.
Okay. So a couple things I would say is that there are ways to do that in a way that are still respectful of the child. Mm-hmm. So I think that is, communicating clearly. I think it's also letting them know what's going on and helping them understand in an age-appropriate way what's needed in the moment, and I see a lot of parents don't do that. They'll just say, be quiet. Well, it's like, well, why? What's going on? Help your child to understand, why is that? Why are we asking that of them? Why are we really wanting that? So you want to do that. You also want to make it where it's, ideally, this isn't not always going to happen, certainly that we are in as calm a state when we're doing that redirection and that guidance and saying, look, this is what's happening, because we want them to ultimately to get, they made a choice. That wasn't the right choice in the moment. That doesn't mean that they're a bad person. That's that distinction that is hard to do when we're angry and we're coming from that place of, and usually what's underneath there, digress a little bit, usually what's underneath there a lot of times is our own fears and judgments about, okay, how are we going to be judged in this moment? How is our child going to be judged? And not saying that those are wrong, simply when we're coming from that place, it's really easy to do things like shame that are just totally unnecessary. We can still say, look, that's not appropriate in this situation, so we're going to leave now. Or I'm going to have you go over here right now because this is not working. But to do that in a way that makes a distinction between the behavior and the child, which can be real challenging in that moment. But the more we can stay calm and in our most human brain and not get into our, more primitive brains, the better off we are, and the better off our kids are, because that was one other thing I wanted to say. To get our children to listen, there also is that sense of being ready to actually hear us. And so if they're in a really stressed out state, if they're afraid, or if they're just really emotional, they actually can't listen to us. So we can keep saying, hey, listen, or don't do it. But if it's like talking to somebody who really talking in a language that they can't understand. So that's the thing I see parents do. And I've done myself. Sometimes I'm just talking at my daughter. And if I would pause and say, is she really in a place to hear me? Then once I realize, oh, she's not actually in a place to hear me, I can bring down my temper and go, oh, you know what? There's a different way for us to approach this. So it takes self-awareness on our part as parents to say, is this really working?
Well, yeah, so much self-awareness. And sometimes, I guess at that point, if they're not in a place to hear you, then you might need to remove them. But I think that was a really good point that you said about emotion, because it's so hard. I struggle with this one so much, is that when my child does something wrong or deliberately, doesn't follow our rules or disobey, that there's this anger that does, get created. And I remind myself, I remind other people that you actually don't have to discipline out of anger. You can have a consequence that has no anger attached to it. And it's hard. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said why it's hard. It's hard because you're scared. And when you see your child doing something that you know isn't okay or isn't going to serve them in any way in their future, you get scared as a parent. And then you're scared for them. You're scared, for yourself. Then you're judging yourself. And so all this anger comes up. Part of, much of which isn't even about the kid. And just like I had a teenager I was talking to, and she's like, my parents hate me. They're so angry at me when I do something. And I was trying to explain to her, parents, when they see, like, for instance, you see your 2-year-old run into the street, right? As soon as you know, of course, you instantly have that sense of fear. As soon as you know that kid's okay, then you get angry. And it's one of the things that our bodies, our brains tend to do. And actually, anger is an easier emotion to handle to ourselves than fear is.
And it feels more powerful. So when we're in that afraid place, it feels really vulnerable, right? So it's like, oh no, and as a parent, we don't want to feel that, especially in that sense of like, wait, I'm supposed to be protector and help keep my child safe. So anger's much easier go-to. And like you said, that doesn't actually add in to the consequence. It just adds a layer on there that really is confusing and creates separation between us and our children, which for me and the parents that I'm working with, there is that thinking of long term, I want them to really be open to me as a teenager. I want them to feel comfortable talking to me. So I realize that sometimes that's going to mean I'm going to walk a different line early on, because I know this is something I'm working towards, and it's an incremental process. It's not like I do it once and we've got it made. So that self-awareness is a really big piece. Breathing, staying calm, getting ourselves to a place where we can help our child understand why there is a choice or a consequence out of something that happened, versus it seeming like, okay, we're mad at them and that's what we've done out of our anger, versus, hey, this is what really fit in this situation. It feels different for them. And we can even think back to our own childhood and go, oh yeah, I can remember times like that when it felt different. Sure,
yeah. So I've noticed I'm using the word discipline and you're shying away from that word. So how do you feel about that term?
Well, so I'm not shying away from it in general. I think that discipline, a lot of times people take that to mean punishment. So I don't like that, because I don't think that punishment is something that gets done by, in this case, just in this context, punishment is done by the adults, and it's really about making the adult feel better. It's not really about teaching. Now, I know some people argue with that. So I would say that helping a child learn, helping them understand, that is, and it takes a more rational place to do that. It really is about, I want you to understand why this choice you just made really doesn't work. Like, I give a quick example. My daughter, recently I found out there was some money sitting on the table at home, and she had been with a friend and a babysitter, and I said, oh, where's that money from? And just some coins. But she said, oh, it was from Karen's house, and that's the babysitter. And I was like, what? I was like, that doesn't make sense. What do you mean it's from her house? And so she went on to tell me basically that she and her friend, they took money. And without asking, and part of me right away, I could feel that fear in me, like, oh my God, we don't steal. And so I was like, my choice in that moment was, okay, I got some data. I feel myself getting upset about it. Let me take a pause so I can figure out what I want to say. Because it's important, because it matters. And so I do want to communicate something, but I also sensed that wasn't the right time for me to do it well.
Very good point. Yeah, you certainly need to wait until that anger dies down. So we're going to go on commercial, but I'm wondering, as we're talking, is there any space, in your opinion, for times that kids do need to know, you know what, you just need to do exactly what I say without asking questions? Sometimes. Is there any space for that, where a kid just needs to know, Mom said it, Dad said it, I just need to do it?
Yes, absolutely. And we can talk about some of what I think are some of those distinctions, and how to do it. So it is clear, because you do want to be able to be a communicator that is clear and decisive, so your children know, and they don't think, is this one of those times? What am I supposed to do here? So that, to me, the onus is on us as the communicator.
To be clear about that. Okay, that makes sense. Yep. So I have lots more questions, but we are talking with my guest, Shonnie Lavender. And Shonnie, what is your website again?
It is ShonnieLavender.com.
Great. Talking about our parenting struggles. And you are listening to Dr. Zoe on LARadioNow.com. I'll see you in just a minute.
People ask me, how do you have so much energy? I am not a coffee drinker, but I love the benefits of matcha green tea. More antioxidants than coffee and a smooth energy, not the jittery kind that lasts me all day long. Perfect for you supermoms too. I have searched the world over for that perfect matcha for my smoothies, and I have found it at Kiss Me Organics. You can get it too at kissmeorganics.com. Enter the promo code Dr. Zoe, DRZOE, for 10% off and free shipping. Experience the smooth, healthy, organic energy of matcha green tea. KissMeOrganics.com.
Hi, welcome back. This is Dr. Zoe, and we are here with my guest, Shonnie Lavender, a coach for parents, and we're having such interesting conversations. We only have less than 10 minutes left. And we left, and my question, as we're talking about parenting, and my question was about discipline, and Shonnie, and I keep calling you Connie, sorry.
No problem.
Shonnie and I were talking about that, so I wanted to flesh that out a little bit. And my question is to her, in her opinion, where is that place where kids do need to know that basically, irrevocably, without any questions, you have to listen to something I say without questioning it?
I think that's a great question, and I would say yes. I mean, there absolutely are times, one, because the decisions at the parenting level, if we still have a minor child, things are going to fall back to us. So yes, we are responsible. So I think the things I would say is, yes, that's true, and one, the more we can alert our children in advance. Now, we're not always going to be able to do this, but when we can, that helps them, because they're very much in the present. And so it really helps them to, okay, we're going to grandma's house, and it's different set of expectations there, so helping them get into that place where they know, okay, yeah, it's different. So letting them know in advance. Getting down, when it's a younger child, but any child really, is being at their level. So, we don't think of ourselves as being physically imposing, but certainly to young children, even a small woman is still bigger than a young child. And so being at their level, so it doesn't feel, when you just think about the brain and how it works, that's a threat. Somebody standing over us saying, you have to do this. that's just scary. So getting at their level, speaking to them, being compassionate. We can still be really clear and definitive and saying, this is not going to work right now. And we can do that in a loving way versus yelling at them or grabbing them. The other thing that all of us do at times, I know this happens for me, we often get focused on the don't do. So that's what we communicate. And one way we can start to make shifts is let them know what they can do. Get their focus on, this is what I want you to do. It's like you think of an animal, right? You say to a dog, sit. You don't say, don't stand. You say,
absolutely. I think that's a very good point. And I'm
not saying that kids are pets.
Sure.
But there is that piece of turn their attention towards what you are wanting, what is acceptable. And the other thing, I'm going to give a little plug for something that's been new in my life. I definitely go to command and control under stress, so I sound like a drill sergeant,
sure.
So, and what I noticed was every time I did that, not only was it not working for me, because I'm spending a lot of, I'm really stressed and my daughter's not listening. It's not working for her because she's getting more revved up. So I actually, not for this reason, but I was taking improv classes to learn improv skills. And what that has awakened in me is more humor and more play. And children, that is their natural language. So we don't have to, I'm not saying everybody out there now go and try and be a comedian. If we, though, can use a funny voice sometimes, now I'm not saying in a very serious matter, to be funny, but try that with your child. Experiment and see. I have one now that I do. My daughter calls it Be the Lady, and she's the naughty monkey. And I do a Jamaican accent, my best example of a Jamaican accent. And that allows me to actually connect with her, going back to that earlier theme of connection. And yet she's really receptive to it because it's fun. So she's actively really listening to me. And I'm not stressing out. I'm being like, come on, naughty monkey, you have to go now. It just be time to go. And she, I don't know how Jamaican that is. Sounds
pretty close,
pretty close. But that has, for her, it's really been, she likes it. She's like, okay, I know that mom's being serious, but it's coming across as fun. So it's almost a counterintuitive thing for most adults to think that our children will listen to us if we aren't in a stern voice, very serious, having even sometimes a mean look on our face. They actually listen really well sometimes when we don't have any of that going on.
Well,
so I invite listeners to try that on and practice it and see actually what happens.
Very good point. Yes, and that's true. Kids do respond very well to that play. And sometimes in our busy lives, we don't have a lot of time for play, and we need them to listen, and we need them to do that right now. So we didn't get a chance to talk a lot about shame, but what would you say, or maybe just give us a couple ideas of ways that we unknowingly shame our kids?
So when we have some of the things you talked about earlier, the fear and the judgments going on in the background that we're not aware of. So this is why it happens a lot when we're out in public. Because some part of us is thinking, oh no, what are people thinking of me? What are they thinking of my child? So when we're afraid of those things, it is very easy for the way we communicate with our children to unknowingly communicate, you are a bad person, you are unworthy, versus this choice doesn't work. So it can be, usually it's in our tone of voice. It can be in our body language, that look that sort of says, I'm just so disgusted with you. And, most of us have probably had that in our own childhood. We can think back, oh yeah, that way somebody said, you can even just say your kid's name with a, sense of, who are you? And so that's shaming, as anything that they could construe as, oh, I'm not good enough, versus, oh, I just made a poor choice right now. And so the first thing I always say for anybody, the best thing to do is start to bring awareness. When you have those moments, reflect on it. Did that sound, could that maybe have given your child an impression that you were disgusted with them, or thought that they were, you wanted to just say, that is not my child? And if that's in you, then they got it. Because kids they pick up on what we communicate, whether we do it intentionally or not.
Sure.
So apology is a really good first step. you know, and own that. Like, hey, I don't want to treat you like this. And then, you know, do something like, you know, do my course, get my free tip sheet, look at Brene Brown's work, you know, start to understand what is it inside you that makes it easy to shame. I do in my own life. My one is when my daughter doesn't do what I think she should know by now. So I know for me that's a really easy like tripping point. So I just remember that and I'm like, okay, am I thinking that she should know better at the age of 7? It doesn't mean that she doesn't have knowledge, but when I treat it as, boy, she should know better in that moment, it's very likely that I'm going to shame her.
Right.
Versus saying, hey, I know that you know things and maybe you forgot in that moment, and I want to help you, you know, really make a better choice next time.
That's a good point. And I think it's also necessary to talk to our kids about who you are as a person and how I feel about you as a person and what that behavior, you know, created in me and how I feel about that behavior, that the behavior was not okay, but you as a person are awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you thank you so much, Shonnie. We didn't even get to everything. I had some more other questions. I wanted to talk about that parenting style, you know, differences, and we'll talk about that some other time. But I appreciate you being on my show and talking about these parenting struggles, because all parents go through it.
Yes, we do.
And so, Shonnie, we can get a hold of you on your website, on Facebook. You can probably just Google Shonnie Lavender, ShonnieLavender.
That's it.
Yeah. And you can find her. She is a coach for parents, for conscious parenting, and she has some great groups and some courses that you can take, and you can, of course, can work with her individually as a coach. So thank you for tuning in to the Dr. Zoe Show. Tune in next week and every week on Tuesdays from 12 to 1 Pacific and 3 to 4 Eastern at LA Radio Now. And you can check out reruns of my show on iTunes, Google Play, Libsyn, YouTube, where I am your life and relationship coach. I help sometimes struggling superwomen keep your mind in the game by redefining your superwoman. Connect with me at drzoeshaw.com, drzoeshaw.com, or any of my social medias at the handle Dr. Zoe Shaw. Join my free newsletter and get a free copy of 30-Minute Life Transformation, The Secret to Getting Stuff Done, by texting the word JOIN to 38470. I look forward to speaking with you wonderful ladies on social media after the show. Have a super week.
You've been listening to The Dr. Zoe Show, redefining your superwoman, with your host, Dr. Zoe Shaw. Don't forget to sign up for her monthly newsletters to get encouragement, tips, and skills for keeping your mind in the superwoman game. Connect with her now at www.drzoeshaw.com. Tell your friends and subscribe to her podcast on iTunes. Join us next time for another edition of The Dr. Zoe Show.